I don't think it's unusual for kids to be fascinated with money once they understand what it is. And having lived overseas as a young child, it was one of the first things that I understood was that there were different countries with different styles of money. Going to England, I especially remember the 50 pence piece. I would sneak into my mother's wallet and take a 50 pence piece and run down
50p.
to the corner store to buy Smarties.
Oh,
And
the Swedish shop. And I remember those Smarties. Absolutely. Our boys loved the Smarties.
oh yeah, and back then you could buy something with 50
Oh,
pence.
yeah. That was big money.
So when we came back to the United States when I was 7 years old, I already understood that there were different types of money. I understood what exchange rates were because people were constantly converting things back into dollars when we were living in England. My parents and older brother also traveled on the continent while we lived in England, so they brought back Spanish money and German money. I knew what Deutschmarks were. So one day I was sneaking around in my brother's room. I was constantly, enthralled with my older brother, who was 10 years older than me. So always wanted his stuff. And I'm rooting around in his room one day and I find a Ziploc bag full of bills. And I know it's currency. I pull it out and I could tell that it was older. There was lots of Asian currency, obviously in characters that I didn't understand, but I came across a 50,000 Deutschmark note. And I knew what those were. My dad had bought a car in Germany, so I knew what Deutschmarks were. And I run downstairs, I grab the newspaper, I find the conversion rate, and I like, this is $30,000. This is $30,000. I just found a note for $30,000. I run over to my mom, like, Mom, look what I found. And I show her the bill. She says, yeah, the unfortunate thing is you don't know whose picture is on that. It was Adolf Hitler. It was a Reichsmark note from Nazi Germany that my grandfather had brought back after the war. And
just like the old, Confederate money too.
Right. Completely worthless. But thought of that story as we are going to be chatting with JJ Wenrich, the author of Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks, for episode 34 of the Valuability Podcast. I'm going to be talking about all sorts of things related to teaching kids about money and investing. It took me back to my time as a kid. I share my own story about how I became interested in investing during our interview, but the Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Dan Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for over 20 years. I'm joined each week by my co-host, friend, and mentor, Philip Simonson. Philip was in financial services for over 40 years, also as an advisor, a field leader, sales trainer, and senior manager, covering areas such as advisor development and field operations. One quick note for our listeners is, at this time of year, I always forget it, daylight savings time ends this weekend.
Spring ahead, fall back.
And also, Philip, you touched on it again this week in our interview, and you've mentioned it in the episode where we talked with Brett, broker Brett, about our experiences in financial services. But Nate actually picked financial planning for you as a vocation. Like, he guided you into that. I had no idea that was how you got interested in financial planning.
Yeah. Nate's also the guy who said, last time I checked, the guy in that other room you're describing, which was you, he's brighter than me. And I remember, and last time I checked, I was brighter than you. So,
the guy in his purple overalls and
oh, oh, good gosh.
my black nail polish.
Sure, I'm glad I was taught at a young age. One of the many things we'll be talking about.
Was it actually you then? I remember one time I came into work with black nail polish on, and about halfway through the day, Nate came in and he says, "Flake, you got to get rid of the nail polish."
It was probably me running down the hall. Get rid of that damn polish.
Wherever you find your podcasts, you should be able to find the Valuability Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. Or you can find us on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the episodes tab, and all of our episodes are in our player. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Sharing is the best thing that you can do for us as we continue to build the podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with us with ideas, questions, comments, articles for us in an article review, send an email to info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Or you can reach out to us through our social media accounts. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook links are all at value-ability.com on the Contact Us tab. Now, we are going to have an extended main section this week, so we're going to jump over to that. We are going to not have an article review this week because it's a little bit longer of a main section. So let's jump right in to our interview with J.J. Wenrich, author of Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks. And now we're very pleased to welcome J.J. Wenrich to the Valuability Podcast. He is the author of Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks, which is available at teachingkidstobuystocks.com. Now, JJ, we met first through our Twitter accounts as I've been trying to build our Valuability Twitter page, but tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into investing, and then what led you to writing this book.
No, thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on your show. I got into investing, I guess, the first time. My first introduction was when I was a kid, when I was in seventh grade. I was always interested in what the market was about just because I grew up in a small town in Kansas where we didn't have cable, so all we had was the 4 TV channels coming over the air. But I'd watch the nightly news and I'd see the stock report, and I always wondered, I wonder what that's all about, because neither of my parents ever really talked about that sort of thing. And then in 7th grade, I just had a fantastic teacher that she taught us so many things about just life and current events, and one of those things was the stock market. She brought what we called back then a stockbroker. I don't know of anybody in the country that calls himself a stockbroker anymore, but
Right.
No, and they had all the power back then, didn't they? And financial planning. What was that? You didn't even know about that term.
Exactly. Yeah, we keep coming up with new titles for the same job every year. Maybe sound more important or more impressive. But yeah, she brought a stockbroker out to talk to us about what the market was. And she enrolled us in a game that Kansas State University sponsored where you would use play money and pick stocks, and really kind of lit a fire under me that, oh, wow, this is interesting. I feel like this is something I'd like to learn a lot more about. So I was pretty hooked, and I started to keep track of things a little bit closer, and told my mom that night when I got home, I'd called her at work and I said, bring home graph paper. I'm going to need some graph paper.
Cool.
And so that was kind of my first introduction to it. That same teacher, she opened up a store within the school just to sell pencils and candy and gum and things like that. But she said, all right, everybody in the 7th grade class, you're shareholders now. And we all became shareholders in that. We would get our stock at the beginning of the year and sell it at the end of the year to the next class, but we'd get dividends along the way. And that's how she introduced it to us. And Then did a little bit more of that stock market game in high school with some other teachers that were great about bringing it to the school, and then kind of put that on the shelf for a little while until would have been my senior year at the University of Kansas. Was in the business school and had a professor that was just incredibly interesting to listen to talk, and he loved the markets. And this would have been right at the height of the tech bubble. So it kind of caught, I think, the general public's attention just because the market had been going up so much. But he really lit that fire again under me that, wow, I think this is what I'm going to do as a career. Because I'd had a roommate my freshman year whose dad was a commodities trader,
Mm-hmm.
and you had some introduction from that. But no, it was that professor, Mark Hershey at the University of Kansas, that really made me decide, this is something that I want to do professionally.
I really love the analogy. Is that where you got in the book? You use that analogy of the small business, the lemonade stand. Is that where you got that idea? Was from your seventh grade teacher, the way that she had you guys involved in that school store? Because I use that all the time, right? To get people to stop thinking about, you know, AT&T, right? At AT&T, yes, it's a big business, but it's not fundamentally any different than the restaurant on the corner. And so I always try to bring it back to that, that one person sole proprietor kind of concept. I've never broken it all the way down to the lemonade stand, which I like even better because it completely simplifies everything. That I've always tried to do that for people is think about yourself as being the owner of a small business, and then, what are dividends, all of those different things, explaining it in that context. So I just thought that was a fascinating analogy that you use.
Yeah, I think that really did set the stage for it. And then over years and years of working with both clients, and then also worked with financial advisors as my clients, and then they would have me talk to their retail clients, that end investor. It just, over time, I felt like it helped simplify to people that kind of mysterious world, because a lot of people, they see it and it just seems too big to understand. And when you can just break it down to, no, these are all just businesses trying to make it in the world. And if your business worth more or less when the profits are more or less, it helps people understand, all right, here's why those numbers bounce around, why the prices bounce around as much as they do, is because it's people trying to determine, all right, is everything going on in the world going to make this business worth more or less? So just really my goal in working both with clients, but then especially with writing the book, was all about trying to make it less mysterious and make it as simple as I possibly could. And I felt like, well, what's the simplest business out there? It's your son or daughter running a lemonade stand.
Mm-hmm. We started lived on a country club when we moved back from London, and kids were, let me see, 10, 9, and 5. Garrett is the middle one, and so I said, boys, you want to earn some money, put up the lemonade stand. We butted up to the tee boxes, the 18th and the 16th, and collect a bunch of golf balls, because it's amazing. Here's these women and men that belong to this country club. They come in with their Mercedes. They come in with their Jags. They come in, but boy, they watch them when they lose a ball. It's minuscule the price they pay for the ball, but boy, they'll look like crazy to find it. So sell sell the balls. 5 for a $2 or and sell your lemonade. Garrett figured it out. He put his 5-year-old brother, who is very cute. He had him, market him, going up to the people. How can you refuse a 5-year-old? He figured out he made more money that way than him sitting behind the stand. Plus, he was very shy, but he was a very good thinker. And the point, oftentimes what I find is, as parents, that it's a conversation, a taboo. From some Midwesterners, we were told, you don't ask people how much they make. You don't talk about money. And so then a lot of children grow up, it's this big unknown. Um, Did you find that, what are some of the best hurdles, for those parents that are listening, to approach this subject matter, in your eyes, in your experience, JJ?
No, I think you're exactly right. The first thing is to get around that taboo that you know, it's probably rude to have your kids going up and asking all of your neighbors and friends how much they make. I get that, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them about money and how much life costs. And I think that,
Right.
of all the life skills we teach our kids, that might be as important as any of them, that they can handle money, because I mean, that's one of the leading causes of divorce or money problems.
Amen.
It's one of the leading causes of stress and depression and all these things. And, we give them a lot of skills. Why not give them that one that really bleeds into every aspect of their life? So no, I think you're exactly right. And I grew up in the same type of environment where it was a bit of a taboo to talk about that. And you just helping your kids understand, all right, well, there's a line there. You don't want to be rude, you don't want to be nosy, but at the same time, tell them about your life and tell them that the things that they need to know. And a lot of grown-ups don't know the stuff either, and that's probably why there's so much hesitation for some folks to have that conversation. And especially if there's stress in your house, if there's money stress, you might be trying to
Mm-hmm.
shield your kids from that. But I think that you can find that balance of teaching them what they need to know, teaching them the psychology of money, because the math is easy. It's the psychology that's
Right.
so hard.
Well, isn't that the truth? And that reminds me, you probably can appreciate this, being an old Ameriprise man. Remember Harvey Golub?
Yeah.
Harvey ended up, Dan knows where I'm going to be going here, but I think it's still very relevant. He's left left the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, running the old IDS, and become president of American Express, going out to back to New York. He was a Brooklyn kid. Dad taught him money. Dad was a push cart. On in Manhattan every morning. He'd take the push cart, get it out there, and he'd sell his wares on the street. And Harvey speaks to the analyst for the very first time, and they ask him, Mr. Golub, who's your number one competitor? And he says, without any hesitation, Disney World. Now they go, that's interesting. Mr. Golub, we're now more confused after asking that question before. Do you mind sharing with me why you said Disney World? He said, no. He said, I'm sure you wanted me to say Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, UBS. He said, that's not it. The U.S. consumer, they'll spend more time planning their 2-week holiday to Disney World than there will their financial future. So the key, it's just like you said, teaching them the psychology and how to sit down and do the plan, because time is, the number one currency that we all have is time. And if you've got health, you've got the ability, discipline to save, get a good advisor, or teach yourself. And along with time value of money, as you said, JJ, it's easy. The math is easy.
Yep.
It's just getting people, making it entertaining, like you said, and getting them involved early.
Well, and that's one of the things that I particularly liked about the kind of the way that your book is structured is it's really for adults who have questions, who want to teach their kids. Right. And so you're really making it a family activity and allowing those people who do want their kids to know, but may not know the answers themselves, and giving them a platform for, kind of learning that right along with their kids. That's what I thought was really brilliant about the way that the book was structured, is that it's not just a, hey, this is for kids. It's really structured for adults. It's almost like a Simpsons for investing, right? It's got the kid level, but it's really at an adult, understanding level.
Yep. Well, you made some points, Philip, there about your kids and putting the youngest one out there as the one to bring people in, because who can turn down a cute kid out there trying to work hard? the fine print on my book is the subtitle. So the main title is Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks, and I've got picture of a young kid on the cover of it, but the subtitle is Stories and Lessons for Grown-ups. So it's written for parents, it's written for any adult that wants to learn, but written in a manner that it's, here's how you teach your kids. Oh, by the way, I know you're trying to teach yourself this. So there's some marketing in that. There's the hook of,
Sure.
all right, there's the catchy title that draws you in. Well, how in the world can I teach kids stocks? But then you get down to it is, oh, well, this is actually for adults. It's Stories and Lessons for Grown-ups. And we debated on that subtitle. I mean, I look at some of the first posts that I put up on social media that had a different subtitle. It was something like, helping parents teach kids or something like that. I can't even remember what it was. And then eventually came to the Stories and Lessons for Grown-ups. But that was the whole goal is, let's reach the kids through the grown-ups, but let's catch their eye, because my actually initial intention was to make something that was a book for young people, for kids, and just didn't feel like I could get the depth that I wanted into it by just targeting that narrow of an audience, and decided that no, I want to incorporate all the stories I have from working with clients over the years. And also, quite frankly, I wanted to put more than just oh, here's what a stock is, here's what stock exchange is. I actually wanted to put a methodology in there to help people understand a little bit of the inner workings of valuing a stock without getting too far into the weeds. And so that's why it ended up being structured that way. It was really an evolution of the writing process.
One of the things I loved as well in it is the concept of the $500 challenge. So tell us a little bit about that. And then I wanted to just kind of tack on an idea that I've used before on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The $500 challenge, this was so I have 3 children, plus a stepson. So my stepson's 29. He's actually an investment professional as well, works for a census. But my 3 younger ones that my wife and I had together, they were born in 3 consecutive years. So when they were about 3,
Irish twins or triplets.
Go Irish triplets. Yeah, 30 months between the oldest and youngest. So there's
wow,
there's a lot that goes into that, especially now that they're 13, 14, and 15. So it gets more complicated every year.
Amen.
But when they were really young, I think it was about 3, 4, and 5. And as kids do, once you learn that money can be exchanged for candy and toys, that's the first thing they want to do is make that swap, because those coins and bills aren't near as much fun once you realize that you can trade them for cool things. And so wanting to help them learn to save, because I grew up knowing I was supposed to save, because my dad was a bit of a saver. My mom was not, and they split up when I was pretty young. I knew I was supposed to, but that doesn't mean I was ever any good at it. And so wanted to help train them a little bit to be savers. And one day I said, you know what? If you guys could just save up $500, I will match it. And I don't know that I thought too long and hard about it. It was just one of those things I said in the spur of the moment. But that's what I said. And then once my wife finds out, what on earth are you thinking here? You can't just give these kids this money. They'll blow it on whatever. I said, well, I'll figure something else out. And eventually, I knew it would take some time, because their allowance wasn't going to get them to $500 very quickly. And the gifts they got for birthdays and holidays, it was going to take some work for them. And decided that, all right, I'm going to match it, but it's going to be matched in stock. And you're going to help pick 1 or 2 stocks to buy with that money. And so it taught them a couple of things. One, it encouraged them to save and have a goal out there to save for, and that made them a little bit more entrepreneurial. They, suddenly the lemonade stand does pop up in the driveway.
Sure.
It gave us some time to explain what a stock was and just what that really meant. And we talked about companies because I love stocks. I love companies. I love studying how businesses evolve and how they do what they do to succeed. And then loved explaining to the kids that some of these businesses you see, some of these companies that they're publicly traded, and explaining what that meant.
Yeah, I've done a very similar thing with kids that are doing fundraising or Girl Scout cookies, that kind of, candy bar sales where they'll come and they'll want me to buy a candy bar. And I always say, you know what, I'll do one better for you. I'll match however many candy bars you sell for the next 2 days or whatever time frame. I was visiting my friend out in California, and her daughter was kind of struggling with it, a little on the shy side, didn't want to go to, around the neighborhood to sell the candy bars door to door. And I said, well, look, you got 2 boxes. All you got to do is sell 1 box and I'll buy the entire other box. And I'll tell you, 2 hours later, she comes back through the door, storming right up to me. Like, here's your box. Give me my money. So I love that kind of matching concept. It immediately resonates and connects with kids, and they understand that. And almost thought of it as kind of a kids 401k match.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the idea. Is I have a match on my 401k, and it was at the time it was in company stock. Let's do the same thing here.
Awesome.
Yeah, the other thing that brings up, and when I've another game, and we've talked about this before, but it's your money. Teaching them money really is having your money earn money. That's the ultimate goal here. So when you're sleeping, you're still making money. And what I used to teach the country club, and I didn't play golf very often. Why ruin a good walk with a game? And that game is played 6 inches between the ears, and that voice I had going on, it just couldn't settle down. That self-talk. There's no way I would just self-destruct. However, what I did know was, look, I like the 19th hole. That's the watering hole, and you have a cocktail afterwards, and you chat and you enjoy the fellowship. And so, okay, I'll take a penny a hole, and you can double it each hole. Or I'll give you $100 to caddy for me. As a matter of fact, I'll give you $300. I'll give you $500. You caddy for 19 holes. That 19th, I want you to bring, instead of you're bringing the 19th, you're bringing that bag out to the car. Or I'll give you $1,000 to caddy 19 holes, or take a penny and double it each time. So 1 cent the first hole, 2 cents the second hole, 3 cents, 8 cents, right, for the third, and onward. But the key is have them do it and do it as an assignment, and they come back and say, whoa, where do I make the most money? It's at the end of life. It's at the end of this game. But the thing that, again, Harvey's whole thing, what we've talked about, I think, just personally, the number one emotional, how would you say, inhibitor, or the unlimited beliefs, no one can make money, no one, it's that can't live with delayed gratification.
Yep.
And teaching them about delayed gratification, and not, you give children what they need, not what they want. So we also said at age 14, you know what, it's done. You got to have a job. Anything you want, we'll pay for your shoes, pay for, get you set up for school that year. But anything above and beyond that, you got to start figuring out how to pay for it. That car, you're not going to get that to your senior year, but you're paying for it. And setting those goals for them, and the boundary work around it is so crucial.
No, I think that's everything. I think that that's the most important thing, is teaching them that that delayed gratification, because I mean, let's be honest, it's the same thing that adults in this country, well, probably everywhere, but struggle with is you want everything, and if you have the money to get it, you get it right then, and then 2 weeks later you're wishing you had the money. And teaching them that psychology of you have to plan for the things you need and you have to pay for the things you need is one of the most important life skills we can give the kids. And the honestly, that really leads to the next level of psychology when you start to talk about investing, because again, that's where the hard part is, getting through that 6 inches between the ears, is overcoming our natural tendencies to want to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. Because if you let your animal state go, um, you'll want to sell when things get rough, and then you'll want to buy when things are going good. And that tendency to maybe take profits quickly and then hold on to losers, where you end up you plant your weeds and you trim your flowers, and all those things that we're hardwired to do that aren't in our best interest. It's all the psychology, it's not the numbers. And that's really where people struggle, and that's where the value is. That's why that's where time can work for you, is if you give it a chance to work for you. But if you're constantly in your own head, then you never even get that far.
Right. So true. Well said. Well said. Any key learnings you're picking up on from people who've read your book? And I don't like the word best practices, because but for lack of better words, I guess, is there a best approach in how to have the taking the book and working with your children and having it become meaningful and impactful, and has stickiness and
Yeah. What we've found is that on a couple levels. One, on the parental level, that moms and dads are actually finding that it is easier to have these conversations with their kids about companies. I mean, the one hand, it's the saving, and it's teaching them that delayed gratification and how to not just spend all that you have, but then taking it to the level that I really wanted to see it. Whereas if they are shopping with their kids, or they are helping them spend their own money, whatever it may be, you're out to dinner with them, starting to have conversations with them about, this is a business, this is how businesses make money, and some of these businesses are publicly traded. So seeing parents that actually put it into practice, or they may do, we're coming out of summer now, but we're well into the fall, and in some parts of the country getting into winter here a little sooner than we thought. But seeing people that would do that challenge over the course of the summer, maybe $500 over several years is a lot to do, a lot to bite off. But saying, you know what, save $100 or whatever the number might be by the end of the summer, and I'll match that. So just seeing people, people taking these things and putting them to work. And then on the other side is we've had a lot of kids that have read the book. Some younger than I ever thought would read the book. I felt like, all right, anybody high school is going to be just fine with it. But we've seen some kids that aren't even teenagers yet that have read it, gotten excited about it. Sometimes they've actually gone and met with their parents' financial advisors. But seeing these kids actually open up stock accounts and start to really, get interested in it and start to buy stocks. My dad,
Robinhood has made that easy, haven't they?
Oh yeah, technology's made it all so much easier, especially something like Robinhood, where it's on an app that's in their world. I mean, I think back to 7th grade when I first was really introduced to it.
If I wanted graph paper,
exactly, and you had to get out the newspaper to see what yesterday's prices were.
Right.
And do you remember how those stocks were listed? They were listed in alphabetical order by their ticker
Absolutely.
Right.
So if you didn't know that AT&T's ticker was T, I mean, how in the heck did you ever know what you were looking at? And you couldn't just Google what's the ticker symbol for this. You had, I don't know how you looked it up. Do you go to the library? It was a mystery.
That's right, and that's where those brokers used to have all the power because they had the information. Now the consumer has just as much information as the broker / financial advisor, financial planner. However, like you said, we come up with a new title every day. But
it's funny that links directly to my story. I was always, I don't say I was interested in money. I kind of come from the opposite side. I'm one of the few people that I've had to learn to spend more. I was the youngest and none of my siblings were good with money. And so my dad just rode me about how I was not going to be good with money. And the famous example is 7th grade. I went to Washington, D.C. from North Florida, and they gave me, I think, like $100. And then, so this would have been like 1985, $100 to spend and then $100 in emergency money. And famously, my middle brother had gone to Spain when we lived in England, and he came back with 36 cents of his emergency money. And it's that number is stuck in my head for years because it was, my dad was 36 cents. You're going to come back with 36 cents, just like your brother. And I came back with $186. I spent $14 in the 5 days I was gone. Right. And I was so focused on proving my dad wrong that that is extended into my adulthood. I've had to learn that, hey, enjoy yourself a little bit,
right,
rather than the opposite side. But that same year, I came up to Minnesota to look at the school that I ended up going to for high school, and ended up meeting my godfather for the first time, who was my grandfather's college roommate. And he saw me looking at the Wall Street Journal stock pages, and I was always fascinated with that. And it's exactly what you said. It seemed like a code of some kind. I was really big into cryptography, and I actually already had the graph paper because I was a Dungeons and Dragons nerd. But I just fascinated with it. And so he saw me looking at it, and it touches on one of the things in your book that I think is really important as well, is it's not just parents, but other people, be it a teacher or for me, it was my godfather who said, okay, you pick a stock and I'll give you $500 and we'll put it in a minor account and buy that stock. So we did that all the way through high school. I ended up financing a decent portion of my college with some of that money. But it took someone else outside of my parents to make that next step. And so I thought that was a really great part of your book, was that reminder that, hey, enlist other people, whether it's a neighbor or a godfather or grandparent or aunt, uncle, somebody, a friend of the family that can also reinforce these ideas with the kids.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, what I've learned from my kids, and a little more every year, is, they listen to you like you listen to your dad about, not coming home with 36 cents, but it's almost in a rebellious way that, all right, I'll prove you wrong. But if you can, for me to say it or another mom or dad to say it to their own kid, it carries some weight, but it's a different weight when it comes from someone outside the family, because they're used to listening to mom and dad. And, with my daughter, the quickest way to have her want to do something is have her think I don't want her to do it sometimes. So.
And the prophet or Messiah never comes from within. It's always from the outside in. Yep. And and so it's, but as I think back to, you've got this whole conversation, and thinking of my father and other things that he just taught me about money. And they were 1918, so he grew up in dirty 30s, and then from there, he had to go off to CC camp. At age 16, you didn't. And I remember saying, "Pa, you never graduated from high school." He said, "No. How did you figure that out? No one, your mom doesn't even know." And I said, "Well, your sentence structure, it's always, hyphenated, or just, it's not quite complete." And of course, I'm no example when it comes to the English language and the art of it. I slaughter it. But then he said, well, you saw how we were raised, first generation. I slept on a couch, in the back room off the kitchen. You know, your your aunt, she was the only daughter, so she had the separate room, and Gordy had the other room, and I went off to CC camp and got $30, kept 25. No, kept 5. 25 went home. But what he taught me in about just the issue around money was it wasn't just the words, but it was also matching up his words with his behaviors. So he said, one example, he said, well, never buy anything and pay full price for it. You don't have to do that. And I said, what do you mean? He says, look, the best time to buy summer stuff is in the late summer going into fall. That's when it's on sale. They've got to clean out their inventories. So don't, think you always have to have the newest and the best right away. Learn to negotiate and again, live with that delayed gratification. And I think a lot of what they've dawned on me there is, as a human being, we're made up of many different facets, right? It's your career, it's your health, it's your financial, it's the sexual piece, it's the spiritual piece. But a great exercise is sit back and look at your grandparents and then look at your parents and how they addressed every one of those issues. How did they grow up about money? Well, you never talked about it, or you never, boy, you saved every nickel and every penny, you just didn't dare spend. Versus, oh no, it came in and it went out that same day. So it's what was observed, and you don't have to uh, repeat that. Each and every one of us. Look, your mom and dad, we taught you some good things, and we're going to teach you some bad things. It's like the internet. You got to filter out the bad. But you don't have to keep carrying these behaviors and traits we've given you into the future, particularly if they're bad ones. And I've had that conversation. I didn't with obviously my dad because there was no internet, etc. But with my boys, we certainly did. And again, it was kind of setting that boundary work. I said, one of the key things I said with them is too, I said, look, what you're not going to do is you're 35, 40, and you say, hey, I'm screwed up because you screwed me up. Well, time out. That's not flying. That's taken from here on out. It's personal responsibility. Your choices, your consequences. And, again, it's just having that conversation with those children is important. I loved what you just said, JJ, around when you're out having a meal, you talk about money, or, what's tips stand for? And I never knew that, but tips stand for, and I learned it over in England, is to, the Brits don't tip. It's very rare. That's just what you're paying for is already included the service in that. Tips is to ensure proper service. That's what it stands for. And if you're going above and beyond, all right, and then it might be worth a tip. But you know what? Don't give 20% on a big meal, on a higher $100 meal or 150. Maybe you're giving 15 on that and 20 on your breakfast. However, but having that conversation.
You've recently started a podcast yourself. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I never thought I would do this, but I was encouraged to start my own podcast as part of what I'm doing. And so we're about 7 or 8 episodes in. It's called Piggy Banks to Wall Street. And it plays along the same lines of, all right, how do we go from that just saving money to actually talking about investing? And let's keep it fun, let's keep it interesting, and let's make it not quite so mysterious. So that's what I've been doing. That my guests so far have been financial educators and people that work with either adults or kids, but they're all about financial education. So my tagline is bringing the best minds in financial education to people. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun to try to develop that skill set of interviewing people, because it's not something I've ever really done. And I feel a little bit.
Well, we didn't do a good example of that here today for you either.
It is harder than it looks, right? It's one of those things you go into and you're like, oh, this will be fine. No sweat. And you're like, I should probably write some questions down next time.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's what I've discovered. I'll write some questions down and tape it to my monitor so that I'm not looking for it, because I do video it as well. But it's been great to do. Selfishly speaking, I've just enjoyed the heck out of it because it's been good for networking. I've talked to people. I feel like I've outkicked my coverage with some of my guests that I've had. But once I opened myself up into this world of being a financial education advocate, and really in this circle of people that um, try to really focus on not just education, but an emphasis on young people as well. I've met a lot of people that I never would have met otherwise, and there's a community about that, and people are so supportive of what I'm doing, and then I in turn just am so grateful, and I'm supportive of what other people are doing, and we all just try to really keep lifting each other up. And so I've found, this is a good way to, one, get all these other educators' messages out there and introduce them to an audience that I might have, and then they in turn, they you let someone on a show, then they in turn they try to help promote your show as well, that they're a guest. And it's just really led me to having great conversations with people that I otherwise would probably never talk to. We might have a social media connection, do some likes on Twitter, and that was about it. But instead, suddenly you get to know them on a different level. And
does the podcast have its own website, or is it through the teachingkidstobuystocks.com?
Yep, it's still through my book website. So if you go teachingkidstobuystocks.com and then /podcast, it gets you to, or /podcast, that gets you to it. And if you go to the homepage, you'll see a logo on there that takes you right to it. But started it late summer and have been just doing a show every 2 weeks, and really been happy that I did it, and very proud of the guests that I've been able to have on the show. And it's such a neat world right now. Social media is pretty powerful. Obviously, there's some there's plenty of publicity about some of the downsides of it. If there's the social there's a Netflix show that talks about the problems about it. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now, but at the same time, it helps you build connections with people that you wouldn't connect to otherwise.
I just say it's like anything, right? It's a tool, and it's really all about how you use that tool. I say that all the time. Like, there's people when I go on Twitter and they're just like, oh, it's awful, it's terrible. And I'm like, all the stuff I've been reading is positive. But if you're going there looking for positive things, and how you're interacting with it also has a lot to do with how it kind of shapes your experience, right? That's its whole goal, is that it tries to feed you the thing that you want, right? And what you're focusing on, and so it's almost its own little echo chamber or focus. And I say, hey, you got to back out. It's super interesting that I have a couple of different accounts for different things, and it is very interesting. Like, one, I look at a lot more politics on one of my Twitter accounts, and it does seem a little more negative when I switch to that. But I think people don't always realize exactly how much of that is their own input coming back to them from that side. So yeah, definitely interesting on that side.
So JJ, just a shameless plug, where would people go and get your book besides that, most obviously your website? Any other places they could find it, or is it on Amazon? Or
yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on barnesandnoble.com, pretty much wherever you buy books online, you can find it. And then hard copy, you can find it at handful of Barnes and Noble stores, just depends on where you are. But pandemic kind of put a little bit of that, slowed some of that down. But easy to find we have links on the website to Amazon, to Barnes and Noble. You can get it from there. Otherwise, Walmart, Target.com. But yeah, we have it in hardcover, paperback, and then there's an ebook as well. So whatever your preference.
Any one or two pieces of advice for those wannabe writers out there to go about writing a book?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I'd say, I mean, this is the only thing I've ever written book wise, but it starts by writing. Just start practicing. And the way I did it, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but I'll tell you the way I did it. When I decided, all right, I'm going to write this book, the first thing I did is I set up an email address just for collecting my notes. And you have random thoughts that pop into your head at different times, and you just want to get them down. Just want to get those ideas down. And what I would do is I would send it in an email to that email address. So it just became this repository where all of my notes collected. And that's kind of like you say, you have different Twitter accounts for different things. I've always had different email addresses for different things. I've got one for my receipts. I guess I could use folders, but that's way too simple. You've got to have a separate email address for everything.
Well, it's not nearly as quick, right? You're absolutely right that, hey, when you type in that email address and hit send, you just don't have to remember it, and it doesn't get lost. It's going into that folder. So I think that is a little bit better. I do the big one giant email with folders because I'm OCD, but I think that's probably a much better process.
No, what else would you say about writing a book? I mean, that was a good tip right there. Any other thoughts? Or
I would say find as many writers as you can and ask about their journey and ask about their opinions on things. If you are so inclined, get on Twitter. And Twitter for a lot of people is a foreign language. It's like a foreign country to people. But if you search the hashtag writer community, you'd be amazed at the support that you'll find. And it's everything from fantasy writers to nonfiction writers and anything in between. You'll find a lot of support there.
Good.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too is you said it right up front, right? Most of that process is the rewriting, and so many people get stuck in that writer's block of just staring at the blank page. Stop worrying about it. Like that, you're not gonna print the first thing you write anyway. Just put it out there and then start working on it from there. I think that's one of the biggest one is just jump in, start doing it. The more you do it, like we talk about the 5 levels of mastery, it's you don't know what you don't know until you just do it. So go jump in and do it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's times where I would literally just get the first part of the idea out there, and then it would be, or something like that. Work on this later. But you just, it's like they wake up in the middle of the night. You got to write this idea down before you lose it type thing. You just want to get that thought on paper so that you can come back and refine it later. Because, that's the other side of it is, if you're going to be writing it on your own and publishing it on your own, make sure you hire a good editor, because you're going to need someone else to come through, and you're going to get sick of reading your own stuff, and you need somebody to be there to
fresh set eyes
with that.
Right. And there's just stuff you don't see, right? Because you've seen it so many times, you just might be missing that you're completely misspelling a word, or that I've put stuff up on our website where I still have some of those, finish this idea here, just chunked in there. But because I'd looked at it 25 times, it didn't look weird to me until I threw it up on the website, and then you see it. One of the last sections in your book is actually wisdom from kids. What are one or two kind of spots in there that, ideas in there that are your favorites?
My absolute favorite one is my oldest Max. When we'd first set up his account, he had bought Apple stock, and we're looking at
That was my first stock.
Yeah, the beginner's luck was pretty good with that one. But it relates to two things that I quoted in there for him. First of all, when he was probably 6 or 7, he looked around and he saw all of his cousins were on Apple devices. He and his brother and sister were on an Apple device, and he goes, "Wow, it's an Apple night. No wonder that stock is so good." And I thought, I'd forgotten that that even happened until a Facebook memory popped up that I'd put that on Facebook. Back when Facebook was Twitter, and you just put random thoughts on it rather than sharing videos and pictures as much. And so that popped up, and I ended up including that. But that one particular night when we were looking at his account, and he said, "Well, I thought I'd spent all the cash in there. How come there's some cash in there?" And I said, "Oh, well," I showed him the dividends and showed him that, you're getting dividends. And look, it went up. Even though you didn't buy any more shares, your dividend went up because they raised the dividend. And he cocks his head and he looks at me and he says, "So if I just keep buying shares, then when I'm old like you, I can let those shares pay my income instead of having to work all
earning money." Very good.
Oh. Yeah, so that's my favorite one.
Do you have a favorite, from you think about growing up, we always ask Dan and I, our guests, is there a favorite saying that you learned at a young age that, still applicable today, and or one of those pearls of wisdom?
Yeah, my favorite quote, it was one that my high school basketball coach actually had on his wall in his classroom. And it's an Abraham Lincoln quote. And it says, "In my opinion, most people are as happy as they make up their mind to be." And I try to remind myself that if I get down in the dumps, that, you know what, just like Twitter, if you look for negativity, you can find it. But if you look for the good stuff, you can find that too. And just be careful what you're looking for, because that really does, it affects your mindset. And we have a choice to make. And the more we make that choice to stay positive and have one of gratitude, everything else starts to fall in line after that. And I don't say I'm always good at that, but I try to remind myself that as much as I can.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, and I thank you for sharing that, because we do become what we think we are, and boy, there's been enough studies around that power of gratitude. Just if you're ever down feeling low, to get out of it, write down 10 things you're grateful for, or just go out and help someone.
Yeah.
Service work is still very, very powerful. Get out of your own head.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, you get more out of that than if you can give back and just go help people. It can really bring you out of a rut just doing that. So that's so well put.
Excellent. Well, I think that is a great spot for us to wrap up. We've gone over a lot of ground. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. Once again, JJ Wenrich's book, Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks, is available at teachingkidstobuystocks.com. Please definitely check it out. And we look forward to checking out your podcast in the future as well. So thanks so much for spending time with us.
Thanks
so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed it and appreciate the relationship on Twitter. And one of these days, we're going to have to get you on the other side of my microphone for my podcast.
We'd love to do it. Thanks
so much. We might have to have some content. Wait a minute. That's kind of scary. Thanks, JJ.
Thanks so much.
And that is going to wrap up the main section and as well the podcast. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to skip the article review for this week to keep the episode at a manageable length. If you have topics that you would like us to cover or questions for us, reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com, or reach out to us on our social media. Links are to our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts are at value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. The mantra of podcasters everywhere. Next week, a special election edition of the Valuability podcast. We are going to be recording it on Election Day, so we are going to review a list of presidential quotes about money and then discuss those quotes. Being that there's 45, we probably are going to break that up into 2 episodes. Even if we do a quote a minute, which, face it, we're not into brevity. We don't do brevity on this podcast. So it's going to take us a while to get through them. So we're probably going to stretch that out over the next 2 episodes. So definitely check back with us for that in episode 35. How did you get interested in investing? We talked a lot today about getting kids interested in investing. Was it a family member, or what area of study led you to be interested in investing? Reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to share that on the podcast. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances, and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.